As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICANN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized CIMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a CIMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICANN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the CIMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the CIMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Good evening, professional colleagues, students and friends of the Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to another exciting episode of ICANN on Air. Today, Thursday, the 1st of December, 2022, proudly brought to you by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. I am your host, Olamide Balogun, FCA. Season's greetings to all our viewers connected from the four corners of the world. We appreciate you for always taking out the time every Tuesday and Thursdays to join us by 6 p.m. as we dive into vital issues concerning our profession, Nigeria, and indeed the world at large. On today's episode, we'll be taking a close look at policies and taxation. And our guest for today is no other person ever is the lead for the Fiscal Policy and Planning Thematic Group and chairman of the West Africa Debt Management Roundtable of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, chairman of the Taxation and Fiscal Policy Faculty Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, member of the Nigerian Taxation Standards Board, and a member of the Ministerial Committee on the implementation of Nigeria's national tax policy. Mr. Oyedele is a regular guest on various media programs on TV, radio, and online broadcasting platforms. He is frequently referenced in many national newspapers and international publications. He is a member of the Global Tax Force, member of the Global Governing Council. Mr. Oyedele is an associate professor at the Babcock University. He's at the Lagos Business School. He's an alumnus of the London School of Economics, Yale University, and Harvard Kennedy School Executive Education. He is the founder and president of Impact Africa Foundation. Dear viewers, believe me when I say you do not want to miss a second of today's episode. I'll go on a brief commercial break and return to the call a friend who is not yet to darling. Stay tuned, I'll be right back. Welcome. Italy. Welcome on board.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. So I can't hear you though in case you're speaking. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me, sir? I can't seem to hear you.
As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICANN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete
Yes, sir.
the
Mr.
globally
Edele,
recognized SEMA
pardon me,
professional
but can't seem to
qualification
hear you.
and the internationally respected
I think your
CGMA
mic is on mute.
designation.
Okay.
As a SEMA member and a CGMA
No, I put
designation
it on
holder,
mute now.
employers
Did you hear
will
me
look at you
before?
as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have
Did you
5
hear me
years of
previously?
relevant experience and are an ICANN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the SEMA Professional Qualification, the strategic case study exam. Start studying the SEMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Okay. Welcome back, viewers. Mr. Edele, can you hear me now, sir?
Yes. Now I
Yes.
can hear you. I hope you can hear me too.
Yes, I can hear you too, sir. Apologies for the network glitches. So we just go straight into it, sir. Regardless of the class divide, if 10 different people are asked to define poverty or prosperity, they would likely provide 10 different definitions. And that's one of many reasons we are blessed to have you as our guest today, because apart from your many titles that you bear, sir, you're also a knowledge coach. Please enrich our global viewers based on your wealth of knowledge and experience. What do poverty and prosperity mean, technically and practically?
Yes, thank you. I've tried to explain that. I'm not sure whether our audience heard me. I was just trying to explain how the National Bureau of Statistics came up with the analysis and the methodology for the multidimensional poverty index that was published recently, indicating that 133 million Nigerians live in poverty. So I pretty much said that the dimension that they had four dimensions. One is education, health, living standard, then unemployment and insecurity. These four dimensions carried equal weight, 25% each of them. And then all the four dimensions have combined 15 indicators. Those indicators include, for example, school attendance, how many years of education do you have? When it comes to healthcare, it talks about nutrition. That's the food that you have to eat or the lack of it. It talks about clean and safe drinking water. It talks about whether you even have any asset like radio, TV, fan. It talks also about, whether your housing material, your wall, your roof, and your floor, whether, they are natural states like mud or whether they have been, you plaster your wall, for example. So those things, when you are deprived of those things, it's considered that such a person is living in multidimensional poverty. Um, Prosperity, it's not really the absence of poverty, but at least a good starting point. So if you are not deprived of those four dimensions of poverty, then you're not poor. but it doesn't mean that you're prosperous. So prosperity generally is considered to be at the level of accomplishment. When I was looking at this data recently, I tried to compare it with the Abraham Maslow hierarchy of needs theory. So these dimensions of poverty essentially fall within the first two levels, and that's physiological need and safety needs. You don't get to the point of self-actualization. So once you're getting to the point of self-actualization, we can say that is prosperity. For different people, it will mean different things, but usually you want to be accomplished in your career. You want to live a happy life. You want to have material things. Some people want to have their own house, not the mud house, the standard house. They want to be able to afford a car. They want to be able to go on holiday. They want to be able to send their kids to the best schools. So prosperity, often defined, like you said, differently by different people. But the general denominator is that you feel satisfied, you feel accomplished, you feel fulfilled about life in general, and that would be considered to be prosperity.
Thank you very much, sir. That will be considered to be prosperity when we feel general fulfillment. Moving swiftly, sir, the federal government plans to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in 10 years. How would you assess this objective so far? Do you think it is working?
Yes, interesting. So this was something that the president said in, I think it was 2019, and that Nigeria is going to lift 100 million people out of poverty in 10 years. At the time, the poverty population was about 84 million. So today, even though the method for calculating that poverty number is different from what we have now, but the reality is we do have 1.3 million today. So rather than that number reducing, it has in fact increased over the past 3 years. If you take 10 years, 100 million people, it's an indication that you want to lift 10 million people out of poverty every year. So from 2019 to 2022, we should have lifted about 30 million out of poverty net. But we seem to have pushed even more than 30 million into poverty. So I think that the federal government ambition is not backed up by a very solid plan as to how that will be implemented. But I also have to say, and that was in the press in the past couple of days, that the federal government is saying, well, we should even blame the state for poverty. I don't think it's a blaming game. It is that government at all levels must play their part. Local government have a role to play, states have a role to play, federal government has a role to play. If you look at those dimensions, healthcare, education at the primary level, is to be done by the states. Whereas when it comes to employment, the policies of the federal government has significant impacts on employment generation. When you talk about insecurity, federal government has like 90% of the role to play. So it's a combination of what federal will do, states will do, and local government will do to be able to pull our people out of poverty. So the strategy currently, in my view, is not working. Of course, if it's working, the numbers would show. Because it's not showing in the numbers, then it's not working. It's a time for a change of strategy.
It's time for a change of strategy. It's not working, and we need to go back and re-strategize. Very well said, sir. I would also like to follow up with this question that due to low revenue that the government is actually facing right now, government has a huge budget deficit and therefore unable to meet all their needs. What can be done to improve spending on infrastructure and human capital development apart from borrowing?
Yes, good question. So the total amount of money that government is spending as a percentage of GDP is one of the lowest in the world. It's about 12%. So we have countries like Finland, Denmark, they spend close to 50% of their GDP in providing public services to their people. And it's not surprising that those countries are ranked number one, number two, very high in happiness index. So their people are happy. So we don't have enough money to spend, and even the little we have is not spent efficiently. Therefore, it's not difficult to see why there's so much poverty in the land. So government has to start thinking differently because one, They don't have the money to spend. They have to realize that they will not have the money to, spend to take care of everyone, provide roads everywhere, provide schools, provide healthcare centers, access road to the farm, airport, ports, electricity. They won't have the money to do that. So what can they do if the money is not there? What they can do is to be very intentional in identifying what are those infrastructure, for example, that the private sector are better able to provide commercially, i.e., what are the infrastructures that are commercially viable? So take something like rail. So government can provide the rail tracks, but allow private sector to run the train. It's a commercial business that is done in many countries around the world. Electricity is a commercial endeavor. Refining is commercial. Why is government borrowing money to do refining? Airline is a commercial transaction. Why is government borrowing money to participate in Nigerian air? So the little money we have in terms of our priority, we're not spending it where it will make the most impact for the greater number of our people. Even at the state level, you find many of the states building flyovers, they're building shopping malls, some of them are building airports when they don't have healthcare center, they don't have primary schools. Some of them have primary schools, but there are no teachers. And part of it is people like physical things. They want to see a physical road that they can go and commission. But we have to start thinking differently. So I think overall, government has to be wise and efficient with the little amount of money they have, and then leverage on private sector capital to be able to fund viable infrastructure and other developmental needs.
Very well said. So our government have to be wise and put in the little resources into priority. And that can be better put, just like you actually put it. Sir. But also, we realize that there's a jackpot syndrome that is, it's a trend right now where many Nigerians are emigrating from the country in search of better life and prosperity abroad. What is your take on this trend, and what role should the government and other stakeholders play to address the issue?
Yes, people all over the world look for greener pastures, and sometimes people, relocate not because they are looking for greener pasture. They just want a change of environment. Sometimes it's because of the education of their family members, or it could be different things. And actually, the number of Nigerians who are living outside Nigeria as a percentage of the population is one of the lowest in the world. I think it's around 2%. Some countries have it. In fact, the global average is, I think, a little over 3%. So it's not like Nigeria is worst case scenario. But what we have seen, especially in the past 1 year, is that that number has increased significantly. For example, the number of Nigerians going to the UK to study used to be around 8,000. This year alone, it has been about 66,000 based on the number provided by government. So what that means is there's something that is pushing them away. Everybody, almost everybody, I should not say everybody, but a lot of particularly young people want to japa. So the thing about it is government needs to look at that from a policy angle. What can we do to provide the hope for our people so that when they have to travel abroad, they travel out of choice, not out of frustration or desperation? So there's a report we produced at PwC recently, and that report is about brain capital. We can actually create the environment for Nigerians to get employed by multinationals around the world, earning dollars while they're even in Nigeria here. So they'll earn foreign currency, and that would even help us stabilize the value of the naira. And those people will not leave the country physically unless they need to, because living in Nigeria is actually expensive. It's not something that these 133 million people that are multidimensionally poor can even think of traveling outside the country. They can't even afford, to get an international passport, let alone buying a ticket, getting the visas, and everything else. So government has to ensure that the policy environment is right. The private sector has to make sure that they are playing their part as well, playing their part in terms of the kind of training they provide for people, in terms of access to global opportunities, especially the multinationals that are operating in Nigeria need to allow their people have international exposure. And also for household and families and individuals, don't jump on the bandwagon because everybody is going. You go and borrow money and sell land and sell house just to go abroad It's not as rosy as people think. Sometimes when people get there, the story is very different. And so everybody has to play their part, individuals, household, companies, and the private sector, but more importantly, government.
Well said, sir. Everybody has to play their part, both the individuals and the government. And some people will say that Nigerians are actually known to be hardworking, resilient, and innovative people. But why do we not have widespread and inclusive prosperity? In your own estimation, sir, what will you say we are doing wrong?
Mm. Yeah, so I think it's a fact that Nigerians are hardworking and we're smart people. So that's why you see a lot of Nigerians doing well abroad. It's because of the environment. So if the environment is not right, you just work like twice as hard to get a very small result. I think there was a report by the World Bank recently that shows that a child that is born in Nigeria now is going to be about 36% less productive than potentially they're supposed to be because of the environment. So a lot of things is done based on hard work. Um, I even remember while we were in school, from primary school to secondary school to university, you had to struggle to understand simple concepts. In many environments, you see it. It will be very. We see people here who had graduated with BSc in computer science, and they haven't seen a computer before. So you then give the person a
Wow.
computer to do the work, and they struggle, right? We're working too hard. What we need to do is to think about efficiency. This is not even just people who are working in the corporate sector. Look at farmers. The productivity of farmers in Nigeria, they work so hard. You cultivate 1 hectare of land, the produce that you get from it is a fraction of what they will get if they do it in India. We have the land, by the way, arable land. We have everything, but not enough research, not enough technology, not enough tools in doing things. You see the vulcanizers to remove the tire, right? From the tube from the tire. It's a lot of hard work. In many places, you just press something. Even a 7-year-old can press it and then it will bring it out. Those kind of mentality of it has to be hard is what we need to move away from, and just working smarter, getting more results, and then prosperity can become commonplace.
Very well put, sir. Prosperity can become a commonplace once we resolve those little issues. Dear viewers, thank you for joining us this day. I've been guesting Mr. Taiwo Yedele FCA, and he has been doing justice to the topic of discourse, which is from poverty to prosperity, the role of policies and taxation. And talking about taxation, sir, taxation has proven to be the leveler in many climes around the globe. Given your immense knowledge of the Nigerian taxation system, in what ways do you think the tax system can be a contributory factor to either poverty or prosperity of the Nigerian state and our citizens on the long run?
Yes, so taxation is an important policy tool that is used by government around the world to address poverty and also to reduce inequality. So, for example, in terms of poverty, and I've said this a few times, that I think that Nigerian government is taxing poverty in the sense that if you use the income threshold, the average size of a family in Nigeria is five. If they're lucky, two people are working, usually the parents. The amount of money they need to earn just to live above, in fact, just to live on the poverty line is about 70,000 naira per month for each of them. So, and if you tax that amount, you're taxing poverty. So the other issue about that is if you have small businesses, until very recently, about 2 years ago, through the Finance Act, there was no threshold for VAT. So which means the hawker on the street who is trying to sell sweets and biscuits and groundnut is supposed to register for VAT and pay. The cleaner who is earning 20,000 naira per month was supposed to pay personal income tax. Those things actually compound poverty, especially in a country where you don't have social security nets, where government can provide, some tokens for you for feeding and for accommodation when you're unemployed, right? So that is how we complicate poverty. So now, how can we use taxation to promote prosperity? Number one, don't tax poverty. Number two, use tax to incentivize productivity. So if I want to set up a business as a small business today, and I buy little assets here and there, I don't get the input credit. So, and that makes my investment more expensive. What you do in many countries is you allow me to get input credit on my investments and assets. So that way, my investment is a lot more affordable, and I can, start my business faster. You also have opportunities like the African Continental Free Trade Area, the ECOWAS Treaty, and we're not creating the framework for our people to be able to invest, take advantage of those opportunities, and export. Those who can export goods, let them export goods. Those who have primary product, help them to add value to those primary products before they export them. Those who cannot export goods, why can't they export intellectual property? Look at our creative sector. Our creative sector is one of the most popular in the world, but they're not making millions of dollars like people make in America because nobody is even protecting their intellectual property properly for them, right? So you hear this song everywhere in the world, but the money is not coming to them. So there's really a lot that we can do using policies, including taxation, to promote prosperity rather than pushing people into poverty. Another one is multiple taxation. So, the talk of the town in the press in the past few days has been excise duties. Government wants to impose more excise duties on non-alcoholic beverages. They want to increase the excise duty on tobacco and alcohol, even though they've just recently increased them, contrary to the policy that they have approved for the next 3 years. These kind of issues don't help with business development and investment because it creates too much uncertainty. If you go to the capital market, you see a lot of policies that are not encouraging investment in the capital market, which is supposed to be the basis for raising fund for investment for growth. Elon Musk said he was paying $11 billion in personal income tax last year. The reason why he was paying that is not because he's so generous, it's because the environment was right for him to create wealth. Out of
Hmm.
that wealth, he's giving back to the country.
Very well put, sir. Once the environment is right to generate wealth, the individuals will also do their turn by giving back to the country. I'd like to acknowledge our viewers who are connected from all the four corners of the world. Most importantly, some of our regulars who are always on board with us every Tuesday and Thursdays. Talking about one of our regulars, Fabola Temitope Adeni has a question here, sir. He says, what is your take, sir, on the executive recklessness in spending of the ad-end revenue by the three tiers of government to the projects that doesn't have any direct or indirect impacts on the populace?
Yes, this is a concern for all of us. We see sometimes the priority of government at all levels is questionable. We are wondering whether they live in the same planet as the rest of us or whether they live in a different planet. Because if you live in a country where people can't even feed themselves, and then you go and build an airport, or you buy fleet of cars, expensive one for the governor, and they're like 20 something vehicles, bulletproof. Sometimes you see governors do state functions and you say, you know political leaders in the UK and the US won't even try those kind of extravagant lifestyle. So these things give concerns to all of us. Some of us saw the off your mic interview at the National Assembly for NDDC that was supposed to take care of the people, but they can't account for the money they've been given. We heard about the Accountant General for the Federation who was alleged to have stolen up to 109 billion naira. So this corruption thing, and also how even when the money is not stolen, it's not spent efficiently, it's padded or is wasted completely. We've seen instances where a bridge was built when there was no water. You see flyovers where there was never a traffic. So that's priority of spending is questionable in that case. Yeah, so those are some of the concerns that we have. And I think all of us as Nigerians must be asking those questions. If we ask those questions, particularly leading up to the elections, then the politicians will know that it's no longer acceptable to take people for granted and do whatever they like. We've heard about a governor now who is hiring 200,000 personal assistants just to tell whether he's doing well or not. And we see those who are leaving office hiring thousands of people just feel it's not right. It seems like they want government to collapse after they have left. This is not the spirit of leadership.
That is not the spirit of leadership. Honestly, Mr. Yedele, it's always a pleasure having you on Icon on Air, and we're really grateful for creating this time again to educate our people on how to move from poverty to prosperity. And before diving into possible solutions for graduation from poverty to prosperity, please could you educate us on the concept of human capital, of Human Development Index (HDI) and Nigeria's HDI ranking?
Yeah, so generally, if you think about the multidimensional poverty index, they're also looking at the same general benchmark as the HDI. So you're talking about education, you're talking about health, you're talking about living standard. So Nigeria is not ranking well. There was a time we were the poverty capital of the world. And when it comes to human development, you cannot have the attitude that we have now towards healthcare, towards education, and expect that you rank high. In all indicators, whether you are talking about human capital development, whether you're talking about, not even is the sustainable development goals, it used to be MDGs before, whether you're talking about poverty indicators, whether you're talking about employment, all the indicators are not where they need to be. And that means that all the economic plans of government in terms of what they want to do, including the Agenda 2050 that is currently undergoing some work, we need to be very intentional. Think about what they've done in places like Singapore. Think about what they've done in places like China. Think about what they've done even in Rwanda here, right? So with the very little resources they have been very intentional, benchmarking themselves against international standard on the ease of doing business, competitiveness, human development index, and then they are seeing the progress, and the progress is obvious to the rest of the world. So we need to do the same thing in Nigeria. We cannot keep living on potentials. They say Nigeria has the potential, Nigeria is the giant of Africa. We're tired of hearing that. Let's bring that potential into reality.
Very well said. We cannot keep living on potential. It is high time for us to bring the potential into reality. And one of our viewers here is also posing a question to you. Ola Yinka Raji is saying, can we conclude that privatization can actually reduce poverty of a country?
I think it would be wrong to say privatization will reduce or increase poverty. So it's not privatization in itself that will increase or reduce poverty. It is the efficiency that privatization is expected to bring. So if you think about telecommunication, before it was deregulated, we had NITEL, and they did not bring prosperity, right? Thank God it was deregulated. It was, it was done properly. But we should give that credit to the Obasanjo's regime. That is why today you see telecommunication is one of the fastest growing. It helped us to get through COVID period because we could do a lot of things online. It's not perfect, but it's made tremendous progress for us and added to prosperity. If you think about electricity, we can't say the same thing. That sector was privatized at least in terms of power generation and distribution, but we haven't seen a lot of results because the process wasn't done properly. If you think about something like NNPC has been making losses for us for a long time. I think they only announced profit twice in 44 years. Even those profits were just like peanuts. When the likes of Saudi Aramco, even though owned by government, was making hundreds of billions of dollars. So I think the fundamental point is whether you have private institutions or whether they are government controlled, make sure that you drive efficiency. If you cannot drive efficiency in the public sector, then by all means privatize so that the shareholders can hold the managers of the business to account to do the right thing. And the invisible hand, according to Adam Smith, will mean that while you're looking for profits in the private sector, you're doing what is good for society as well.
Absolutely. While looking for profit for society, you're also doing what is good as well. Following swiftly on that initial question will be, what does Nigeria's poverty index signify, and how does it look across the 6 geopolitical zones and the 36 states of the country?
No, the data is certainly there based on the MBS report. It's clear that we have more poverty in the north than in the south, with Sokoto State leading from the wrong direction, and then Ondo State being number one in terms of lowest poverty incidence. Now, I think one fundamental point that we need to make is that, this data shows that it doesn't matter where the president of the country comes from. It doesn't matter where the most political office holders have been appointed from, whether it's from the military, whether it's from Ministry of Finance, whether it's from FRS, whether it's from Port Authority. It doesn't matter because we've had more people as part of our leaders from the north. Yet poverty is more in the north than in the south. Therefore, Nigerians now need to start playing down all these sentiments of my tribe, my religion. There's nothing that shows here that Muslim are richer than Christian or Christian richer than Muslim, right? So therefore, we should start focusing on who is that competent person who understands the issues we face and who have clarity of mind to be able to do the right thing, and more so the character to make tough decisions that are necessary for the country. So when we do that, then we see prosperity spreading across all the geopolitical zone. But if we continue in this path of religion, tribe, and other sentiments, it won't lead us anywhere.
Very well said, sir. Competence, clarity of mind, and character. Those are the three components that we need to look for in choosing our leaders. And permit me to ask this also, that what are your top three recommendations for government to tackle poverty and create prosperity for Nigerians?
Yeah, clearly, I'll say the first one is evidence-based planning. So government has to use data. You can't just ignore data and start giving stipend or handout to a few people. We say we've given 100,000 people 5,000 naira, or we've given 30,000 naira. So those things will not solve poverty, right? So there's the information you have now. How do you provide access to healthcare, to education? How do you improve living standard? How do you make water available for people? How do you ensure that there's employment? How do you address insecurity? We should have plans for each of the dimensions of poverty. What we will do, when we will do it, who will do it is important for our planning. Number two is diligent execution. When you make that plan, you should diligently execute it by ensuring that what you need to do, we have politicians now with their manifestos, and they are telling us they'll bring heaven down to earth, right? And we are seeing how. So that's how is not very clear. So in the execution, you have to make it clear what needs to be done by who and what time. And then finally, you need monitoring and reporting. So government should not wait for another 5 years when they do another poverty survey. Government should be telling us, even on a quarterly basis, call a press report, a press conference, get the information from local government, from state, from federal, and tell Nigerians what they have done. In how many wards have you built schools? In those schools, do they have basic infrastructure like the board, the library, writing material? Do they have teachers? In the health centers, what are you doing to make sure that our doctors stay and take care of the people? At the university level, I know the university is not part of the poverty index, but it's also important. Are we going to have 8 months of strike? What are you doing to make sure that we improve electricity generation so that small businesses can thrive? How you're addressing the issues of insecurity? We have to do that and monitor and report so that we see the progress that we are making. I think that's the only way we can move the needle on addressing poverty.
Very well said, sir. We need to plan well, we need to execute well, and we need to monitor and report appropriately. Those are the ways to go. Sir, the International Labour Organization, ILO, Declaration of Philadelphia, 1944, states that poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. As a knowledge coach, what is this statement saying, especially to Nigeria and Nigerians?
Yeah, there's this saying about the fact that so when the poor man who is hungry cannot sleep because they are hungry, then the rich man also will not be able to sleep because the poor man is awake. So what that means is if you think because you can afford luxury of life, you have a house, you have a wall and a fence, you have your own cars, you can't ignore what's going on around. When it happens, nobody will be safe. So and sometimes I wonder whether our politicians even understand this concept. They're beginning to see now that even many of them, with all the security protocols, are even still afraid to go home, to go to their constituencies. So this is what it means. It's for real. It's in our collective interest to ensure that there's at least minimum standard for everyone to live a decent life, so that they have food to eat, they have roof over their head, they have what to wear, and they have hope and aspirations, and that tomorrow will be better. Once you get to that level, crime level will come down. You see more people are cohesive within society, and then we have a better society where we can live peacefully and be happy. So yeah, I do agree with that. Saying.
All right. So, ideally, I mean, to be said that we are now in a technological driven world, and we wonder why we are not utilizing that appropriately in Nigeria. How can the Nigerian government or Nigerian states better utilize technology to drive tax revenue, sir?
Yes, there was a Commonwealth Tax Administration, event in Abuja a few days ago where I was invited to speak. And the title and the focus of that conference was on technology in tax administration. And one of the things I said to them is technology provides a unique opportunity for you to address evasion and even aggressive avoidance. So today, if you buy a car, you go to the government to register it. You buy land, government will register the land. You want to travel abroad, government will give you international passport. You want to buy dollars for PTA, government will give you the PTA. You want to open a bank account, government has a role to play through the CBN. You want to open an investment account, almost everything you want to do, any economic activity is within the purview of government. What is missing is that government is not connecting the dots. So we see politicians buying 100 million naira form and they haven't paid personal income tax before. So some states now sold tax clearance certificate to them so they can contest, right? If there was use of intelligence, you would have known that this person was worth, 300 million naira, but they've only paid 1,000 tax, or they haven't even paid at all. So technology gives us that opportunity. But even more importantly, technology gives us opportunity for data for planning. I should be able to know these small businesses in all the six geopolitical zone. What are their primary issues? What are they facing? Do they need training around management, access to finance, skills? Some people, in some market, they just need public toilet in the market. So those kind of data about what people are doing and how government can help them to be able to promote prosperity is also another thing we can get from technology. And once you have the data and you help people to succeed, not only would you have the legal powers to impose taxes and collect from them, you have the moral right to also do so.
Hmm. Moral rights to also do so. Honestly, Mr. Yedele, time is always our biggest challenge of this program. But I would still like to, get the juice out of you because having you on board is always a privilege. This question might sound a bit easy, but Nigerians would like to know what has been going on since the introduction of the Nigerian Finance Act. What have been the practical and positive progress of Nigeria and Nigerians from poverty to prosperity?
We have made some progress. For example, the Finance Act over the past 2 3 years have introduced a threshold for VAT. So your turnover, if it's less than 25 million, you don't need to register for VAT. You don't need to charge VAT. You don't need to even file VAT returns. I know some people still get confused. They say, yeah, you must file need return. That's not in the law. We also have exemption for small businesses. So CIT, if you're a small company, is 0%. You don't pay CIT. If you're a medium-sized company, you pay about 20%, 100 million turnover. And then we also have exemption for minimum wage, 30,000 naira per month. You don't need to pay PAYE or personal income tax. That is progress in terms of trying to address extreme poverty. On the other hand, we've seen some reforms around the use of technology, which is helping even big and medium-sized businesses to interact with government better, to be able to pay their taxes and comply in an easier way. We've also seen instances where government has attempted to give incentives through the Finance Act, for example, for our Greek sector. So all of this combined, we've made some progress, and I have to acknowledge that, and we need to commend government. But we have to remind ourselves that the journey is still very far, and we need to make sure that we accelerate. We can't be making incremental progress. We need to leapfrog because we are far behind in terms of where we need to be.
Hmm. We are far behind where we need to be, but we still need to commend them for that which is done, knowing full well that things will also be done better going forward. Sir, as an objective, because you speak true to the subject every matter. As an objective and non-biased Nigerian, please could you give us your assessment of the performances of the Nigerian National Economic Council vis-a-vis the current level of poverty in Nigeria?
Yeah, the National Economic Council is where you have the governors, and you have the vice president as the chair. You have ministers, CBN governor. I don't think I want to evaluate their own performance because it's not an organ that on its own is supposed to do any performance, right? It's just a meeting of different political leaders and those who are appointed. I'd rather say that in terms of the performance of the economy, as being led by our political leaders, mostly the governors, the president at the center, hasn't been up to where we need to be. Because if you look back the past 7 years, even if you look at this current term in the past 3, 4 years, while you say we've had COVID-19, we've had Russia and Ukraine, these things have also happened to the rest of the world. And we see many countries are faring better. I have to admit that some countries are not even doing as well as we are doing. But if you think about something like oil theft, if we did not allow criminals to steal our crude oil today, and we're making 2 million, barrels per day, and selling it at close to $100 per barrel, naira will not even be close to 700 in the parallel market. It will be a lot lower than that. The cost of diesel will not be as high, and the economy will generally be better. So a lot of the issues we are facing are self-inflicted pain. That it's not God that put the pain on us, it is us, and therefore we need to find a way to bring those out. And the primary responsibility to address those issues rests squarely within the doorstep of those in political authority, particularly members of NEC, like you have asked, including at the federal level as well as at the state level. Many times we don't even remember local government. I can't remember the last time any local government did anything that I'm aware of. I can't even see the accounts online. But they are also an important part of governance, actually directly impacting people at the grassroots, but they're not living up to the expectation at all.
Hmm. Not living up to the expectation. As we gradually coast home, sir, any final thoughts or advice for our audience on how to be successful or remain successful despite the current economic challenges?
Yeah, I'll say that, for everyone that is, following us and listening to what we're saying, you have to think about how can you address your own situation, right? What can you do to be able to to become prosperous? If you're already prosperous, how can you sustain it and even improve further? I think number one is we have to keep learning. So you need to learn skills that are useful. Too many Nigerians are fixated on academic qualification, professional qualification. When they finish one, they pick up the other one. Nobody's interested in those degrees and those qualifications to that extent. People want what value can you add? If you think that data analytics is what they're looking for, go and learn it. Some of these things you can learn free. Within 6 months, you become almost an expert. And we have to make sure that we are commercially aware. There are so many people who are not aware of what's going on in the environment. So you have to follow the news. It may not be the most interesting thing to do. Entertainment is more attractive, but news gives you more value. Read, and try your best to also not be part of the problem, be part of the solution. So if you see people who are corrupt, padding, this padding is not only at the government level. You also see it Somebody has a small business and you can't leave the shopkeeper there. They steal your product before you come back. Some people will bring their own POS to collect your money and put into their. We cannot be part of the problem. We have to be part of the solution, because at the end of the day, this is the only place we can call home, and we have to jointly make it a better place.
Oh, yes, we have to jointly make it a better place. Do not be a part of the problem, be a part of the solution. And in closing, sir, HICAN is always open to ideas that will positively advance the growth of our members, the accountancy profession, and the Nigerian business environment. In what ways can the Institute and our members positively contribute to the discourse on the poverty to prosperity, especially in Nigeria?
Yeah, so our members are generally not people who are poor, because if you look at those dimensions, majority of our members live in cities, they have decent work. They may not be very rich, but they're also not multidimensionally poor. What that means is you can share your knowledge, use your knowledge to help other people. When you have the resources, help one person. You might be able to sponsor, the education of one kid who has no hope, so that they can have hope. And then, follow what's happening in the economy and make your voice to be heard. You can do it on social media. You have the opportunity to do it to the press. Do so. If more of us are asking questions, our politicians will sit tight. And ICANN, as a professional body, has to take the lead. There has to be more contribution to the national conversation. We have the audit bill, for example. Why is it that we have not empowered the Auditor General for the Federation to do their work so that we can control corruption? ICANN needs to speak up very aggressively about issues like that. The budget. Many of us have issues with the budget. ICANN had a session on the budget, recently. But we need to speak more and be able to engage the general population so that they can understand, because we have the knowledge. We need to share that knowledge with Nigeria and help our policymakers to do the right thing. And when they don't, we should not shy away from calling them out.
Thank you sincerely, sir, Mr. Taiwo Idele FCA, for always coming on ICANN on here to share from your depth of knowledge with our members. We are sincerely grateful, and we know that anytime we reach out to you, you're always willing to come on board. On that note, I'd like to say a big thank you to all our viewers who took out their time to join us. You agree with me that our guest was a perfect fit for the topic of discourse today. A reminder, please, that the Institute fellowship registration is on. Members who are due for their fellowship status should please go on the ICANN website. That's www.icanig.org. Till we come your way again next week, Tuesday, with another superlative guest and topic. Do stay safe and have an amazing weekend ahead. On behalf of the producers and editorial team, I am Olamide Balogun FCA, saying thank you and bye for now.